Hello everyone, welcome back to the Science Mentor. In the last lecture, we have understood how photography evolved and how it became an essential part of forensic science. We also learned about Alphonse Bertillon and the importance of standardized crime scene photography. Now let's move on to the from theory to the practical application. Many students ask me, sir, does forensic photography really makes a difference in real crime investigations? So the answer is yes. A crime scene exists only in limited period of time. Once the investigator collect evidence, once the body is removed, or once the scene is clean, the original condition is gone forever. So the only permanent visual record that remain in the crime scene is photograph. Okay. So that's why forensic expert often says crime scene disappear, but photographs preserve the truth. So today we will discuss the three famous Indian cases mentioned in PPT. So our focus is not the legal judgment but the forensic lesson each case teach. Okay. So today we study a landmark Indian cases. So before moving, I'm going to write for you why the crime scene photograph is important. So let's take a blank page. Okay. So here we are writing why are crime scene photograph important. Okay. So the answer here is crime scene photograph help investigators to first is preserve the original condition of scene. Preserve the original condition of the scene. Okay. Second is record the exact position of the evidence. Third is reconstruct the sequence of event. Then suppose support witness statement. Okay. Witness statement. Then um, okay, present visual evidence to the court. Okay. So once the crime scene is disturbed, it can never be recreated exactly in the same way. Okay. So this is one of the biggest reason the forensic photography is performed before evidence collection is okay. So if someone moves the weapon before photographing it, nobody can later prove its exact original position. Okay. So the photograph become a investigator's memory. Okay. Okay, now let's move to the case number one, which is Jessica Lal murder case. Okay, So here we are, Jessica Lal murder case. Okay, so the first case is Jessica Lal. So without going to the complete legal history, let us understand the forensic importance. Okay, so during the investigation, photograph and media images help investigator understand the crime scene and reconstruct what happened. Okay, they were compared with witness statement and other evidence to develop a clear picture of the incident. Okay, and this case reminds us that the photograph do not work alone. They become much more powerful when combined with physical evidences, witness testimony, and forensic analysis. Okay, so what are the forensic learning of Jessica Lal case? I am writing forensic learning of Jessica Lal murder case. So the first learning is crime scene documentation is extremely important. Crime scene documentation is extremely. You only have to learn the learnings of these Indian landmark cases. Okay. Second is photograph support reconstructions. Okay. Then second learning is where is the marker go? Here it is. So the second learning is photographs reconstruct support reconstruction. Okay. As written here, photo evidence and media imagery were very critical in stabilizing the presence of key individuals and the reconstructing the sequence of event at the crime scene. Okay. So visual record strength investigations. Okay. So अगर कोई आई विटनेस होगा वो जो विटनेस करेगा उसको अगर विजुअल रिकॉर्ड्स के साथ मैच करके एक्यूरेटली ऐसा ही हुआ था तो उसके हिसाब से जो एविडेंस है और भी स्ट्रॉन्ग हो जाएंगे. Okay, so imagine that. Let's take an example. Imagine that three witnesses describe the same room differently. One say the victim was standing, another say the victim was sitting, and third say the victim was near the entrance. So now imagine investigator have clear photograph taken immediately after the incident. Okay, so the photo verify which statement is closer to the reality. Okay, let's move to the next case, which is Arushi Talwar hemorrhage case. Okay, where is highlight Arushi Talwar hemorrhage case. So here the Arushi Talwar case is often discussed in forensic science because it highlights the importance of proper crime scene management. Okay, so many forensic experts later emphasize that documentation of crime scene should always be completed before unnecessary movement or contamination occur. Okay, so this teach very for every forensic investigator one important lesson: protect the crime scene before processing the evidence. Okay, so what are the learnings from the ROC case is secure the crime scene. The first learning is securing the crime scene. I'm going to take another pen, which is here. So secure the crime scene. The most important lesson. Okay. Another is prevent contamination, which is also the part of securing the crime scene. Prevent contamination. Okay. So as given below, highlighted the critical need of proper crime scene photography before scene is contaminated, and photograph of every area before touching the evidence. So take the photograph of every area before the scene is contaminated. Okay, and maintain proper documentation. Okay, so this is also the, I'm going to change the color. So here is maintain proper documentation. Proper documentation. Okay. So suppose several people enter the crime scene before documentation is complete. Okay, they may accidentally leave shoes, print, touch objects, move furniture. All these actions are change the original scene. So this is why crime scene protection is just as important as evidence collection. Okay. Let's move to the third case, which is 26/11 Mumbai terror attack 2008. Okay, so everyone know about this case. This is not a, okay. So Mumbai terror attacks. Now let us discuss. Okay, so 26/11 Mumbai terror attack involved multiple crime scenes, multiple victims, and multiple locations. So in such complex investigation, photograph become even more valuable. So the crime scene photographs, surveillance images, and visual documents help investigator analyze movement, identify important location, and correlate evidence collected from the different places. This shows that forensic photography is not limited to a single room. It is equally important at the large scale investigation also. Okay. So how the photography help in the 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks? Okay. I am writing that how photography help. So let's stroke. Okay, so the first help is for document multiple crime scenes. Okay, it helps in document multiple crime scene. Second is record evidence at different location. Okay, locations. So here is written high resolution surveillance and crime scene photograph help identify attacker, map entry point, and match ballistic trajectories. Okay. There is another case also, which is Sector 36, the mysterious house Burari case. So we don't discuss it here. If we have enough time in the future, we will discuss this. Okay. So modern forensic investigation no longer depend on DSLR cameras. Today, investigators also use drone photography, CCTV footage, body-worn cameras, 3D laser scanner, and high resolution digital imaging. All these technologies improves crime scene documentation, but the basic principle remains the same: accuracy, objectivity, and proper documentation. Okay. So जो ट्रेडिशनल मेथड थे वो थे DSLR कैमरा, ट्राइपॉड्स, एविडेंस स्केल, लेकिन जो मॉडर्न टेक्निक है वो है आजकल ड्रोन इमेजिंग, सीसीटीवी एनालिसिस, 3D क्राइम सीन स्कैनिंग एंड digital image management. So I am writing is in the blank page. Let's add an page. So the modern technologies involved in the crime photography is, okay. So the first is drone imaging. Second, CCTV analysis, because CCTVs are mandatory everywhere now. 3D crime scene imaging. Okay. Scanning या imaging. Digital image management. Okay, so if the questions come in DSSSB JSA asking about these cases, don't try to remember every legal detail. Instead, remember the forensic lessons that Jessica Lal case has a forensic lesson that photographs help reconstruction. Arushi's case is protect the document the crime scene before the disturbing it. And 2611 Mumbai terror attacks is photography is essentially large and complex investigation also. Okay, so this is usually what examiner want. Okay, so let me ask you some questions. Which answer you have to answer these questions in comment section. Okay, so why are crime scene photography important? And the second question is, what lesson do we learn from the Jessica's Lal case? Okay, and the third question is, why is the Arushi's case insignificant in forensic science? And question number four is, how do photography help during the 2611 Mumbai terror attacks? Okay, and if you can answer these questions, you have understood not just the case but also the practical importance of the forensic photography. Okay, so far we have studied the history, evolution, and real life application of forensic science. Now we are moving to the most important theory section of this chapter is objectives of forensic science, forensic photography. Okay, so this is one of the favorite topic of DSSSB JSA because direct conceptual questions are frequently asked from it. So in the next slide, we will understand not only what is the objective, but why each objective is essential during forensic investigation. Okay, so move to the slides again. So here is the slide. Move to the next slide. So objectives of forensic photography. So wherever you study any forensic technique, whenever you study any forensic technique, always ask yourself, why do we perform this technique? So to answer that questions, so to answer that question is called its objective. Okay. So the answer of that question is called objective. Similarly, before the forensic photograph pick up the camera, there must be clear purpose behind any photograph. Okay. So the forensic photograph is never taken randomly. Each image must a question, preserve evidence, or assist the investigation. So today we will understand each objective one by one with practical examples. Okay, so let's move to the blank slide for some additional definitions. Okay. Hmm. So we are going to write the definition of objective of forensic photography. So let's take a pen. So objectives of forensic photography. Okay. So we are writing the definition here. So the objective of forensic photography are the scientific purpose for which the photographs are taken during an investigation to accurately document, preserve, and present evidences. Okay, I'm writing the objective of forensic photography are the scientific purpose for which. Okay, so for which photographs are taken during an investigation to accurately document and preserve, and present evidence. Okay, so this is the definition. So notice three important words in this definition: document, preserve, and present. So these three words summarize the entire purpose of forensic photography. Okay, so let's discuss the objective in details. So move to the slides. So the first purpose is permanent record. Okay, so the crime scene is temporary. Once the investigation begins, evidence is collected, bodies are removed, and the area is cleared. So after that, the original scene has no longer exist. Therefore, the photograph becomes the permanent record of the scene. Okay. So the objective of permanent record of having a permanent record is, so let right. uh, I'm writing them here. Okay. So the forensic photograph create a permanent visual record of, first is crime scene, second victim, third suspect, fourth physical evidence, fifth injuries, then property damage. Okay, so preserve the physical state of crime scene before the evidence is altered or degraded. So imagine a road accident. The damaged vehicles are removed within a few hours. So the road mark disappear after the traffic resume, and broken glass is clean. But the photograph take immediately after the accident remain available for months or even years. So this is why documentation is very first objective. So and the objective second is, which is court admissibility. Okay, remember something important. Okay, so evidence should never moved before it has been photographed or admissible in court. Okay, so if the weapon is shifted from original position, so the investigator lose valuable. So we take photograph. The investigator take the photograph of this and present in the court. Okay. So the judge and the lawyer cannot visit the crime scene. Okay, so instead they rely on properly documentation photograph of to understand the evidence. Okay, so how can the photograph helps in the court? Okay, I'm writing. the blank paper. So here is it. Let's wait for some time. Okay. Now I am using a ruled, so I can write straight in this line. Okay. So the photograph help the court by. Okay. First is explain the crime scene. Supporting witnesses testimony. And the third is demonstrating evidence clearly. Okay. The fourth is providing visual document. Okay, so photograph does not replace evidence, but it explains the evidence. Okay, and the photograph alone does not prove guilty. However, it is supported by fingerprint, DNA, ballistic reports, witness statement. It become a very powerful piece of documentary evidence. Okay, so let's move to the next objective, which is investigation aid. Investigation aid. It's this is completed. Okay. So the crime scene may contain hundred of details. No investigator can remember every single observation. So photograph help investigator revisit the crime scene even after the several months. Okay. So how can he assist the investigation is first one is review evidence later. Help in reviewing evidence later. Later. Second, compare observations. Then analyze detail carefully. Then उसके बाद discuss finding with expert. Okay. So suppose fingerprint expert and ballistic experts are working on the same case. Instead of visiting the crime scene repeatedly, they can examine the crime scene photograph. This saves times and also protect the scene from unnecessary disturbance. Okay. So let's move to the next slide. Okay. So here So before moving to this slide, we have a summary of objectives, which is I am going to write. So we require a page which is objective and their importance. It's a table of objective and their importance. So objective and their importance. Some objectives are remain, we can discuss it here. So first is permanent documentation. Importance is creating a lasting record. Second objective is preserve original scene. And the importance of this is record evidence before disturbing. Third objective is assist investigation. So it's help expert in analyzing later. Help experts analyze later. Okay. Then code presentation. No, no, no. Before code presentation is reconstruction. Okay, so reconstruction importance is explain the sequence of events. And the last is code presentation, which help support legal proceedings. Okay, so this is the summary of objectives. So in the modern forensic side, photographs are often linked with digital evidence management system. Okay, each photograph is assigned as a identification number, date, time, photograph name, and case number. Okay, so this ensure every image can be tracked back to its source and maintain proper documentation supporting the chain of custody. Okay, so now we know why forensic photography is performed. So the next question is how it should be performed. So is there any standard procedure of every forensic photograph must follow? So the answer is yes. So we will study the principle of forensic photography, okay, in the next slide. So let's move to the slide we are studying. So this is the definition before moving to the principle. Let's revise the definition. Okay, so the forensic photography, also called crime scene photography, is a art, science, and application of producing an accurate, objective, and detailed visual records of crime scene, physical evidence, and bodily injuries for legal proceedings. Okay, so we already discussed this. Okay, now we understood the objectives. Okay, so now the next question naturally comes to our mind is how should forensic photograph actually be taken? So is it enough to simply click a few pictures? So the answer is no. Taking a forensic photograph is very different from taking a normal photograph. A forensic photographer follows certain scientific principles. These principles ensure that every photograph is reliable, accurate, and acceptable in court. Think of these principles as the rules of every forensic photographer must follow. So if one of these rules is ignored, the quality and the reliability of evidence must be questioned. So let's understand these principles one by one. Okay, uh, I'm going to- so let's move to the blank slide. We will discuss these fundamental principles later, but we have to write some. Okay, so let's move to the blank slide where we have to write these. Okay, so the very first is principle of forensic photography. Okay. So a good forensic photography should be first is accurate. Okay. Second, complete. Third is objective. Fourth, sequential. And the fifth is properly documented. So it's not a photographer, it's photograph. Okay. Okay. So the purpose is not to create a beautiful photograph. The purpose is to create a truthful photograph. Okay. So these are the five words. Okay, and these words are the foundation of forensic photography. So if you remember them, you will automatically understand how professional crime scene documentation is carried out. So the principle one is accuracy. Okay, so the first principle is accuracy. The forensic photograph must represent the scene exactly as it is. Okay, nothing should be added, nothing should be removed, and nothing should be changed. Okay, so the very first is accuracy. So accuracy means true color, okay, correct position, correct size, correct size, then original condition, no misleading information, okay. So the photograph should represent reality. Suppose a blood stain appear dark brown at the crime scene. If someone edit the photograph and make it bright red, the image is no longer representable in court. Similarly, changing brightness or contrast in a way that alters the appearance of evidence can create confusion. This is why the original image is always preserved. So the second principle is completeness. Completeness. A single photograph is never enough. Investigator must photograph the entire scene from different perspectives. Every important object should be recorded. So the photograph includes entire crime scene. Okay, include entire crime scene. Important evidences. Entry and exit point. Victim. Okay, where appropriate. Okay, and the surrounding environment. Okay, so no important detail should be missed. Imagine investigation of burglary. If you photograph only broken lock but ignore the broken window, the investigator may miss an important point of entry. Therefore, the completeness means documenting everything that may become important later. So, the third principle is objectivity. Objectivity. So, the forensic photograph must be show fact only. Second is avoid personal interpretation. Third, avoid unnecessary editing. Remain unbiased. Okay. So suppose two investigators examine the same room. One believe it's suicide and other believe it's homicide. Should their photograph be different? No. Because photographs are not supposed to support an opinion. They are supposed to record fact. Okay. The fourth principle is sequential documentation. Sequential documentation. Okay. Crime scene photographs can never taken randomly. They are always in a sequence. Okay. So the standard sequence is, I'm writing, overall photograph, mid-range photograph, close-up photograph. Okay. So the sequence gradually moves from the entire scene to the individual evidence. Okay. So we will study these three types in detail later. For now, simply remember the order. Never start directly to the close-up photograph. If the photograph only a knife, nobody know where the knife was located inside the room. So the relationship between evidence and the surroundings is equally important. Okay, so imagine showing someone only a close-up photograph of the chair. Can they tell where the chair in the bedroom present? Of course not. Context is important. This is why forensic photograph always follow a sequence. Okay, and the next is then the next and the final principle is proper documentation. So taking photograph alone is not enough. Every photograph should be properly recorded. So every photograph should include, I'm writing, proper documentation. So every photograph should include case number, date, time, photograph's name, photographer name, location, description of photograph, and the fourth is photograph number. Okay. So imagine you are investigating 10 different cases. If the photograph is not labeled properly, they can easily become mixed up. This is why investigation maintain a photo log. A photo log record when the photograph was taken, by whom, and what it show. Okay. So I am going to present you a simple photograph log, sample photograph log. Okay. So I am making a grid for this. Okay. So here is photo number. Okay. Here description. Here date, time, and photographer name. Okay. So photo number one, description, front view of house. Okay. Here date, DDMM, YYYY. Okay. Here time, here photograph name XYZ. Okay. Second is entrance door. Okay. So favorite DDMMYY, time XYZ, someone. Okay. Third is like knife near sofa. Date, time, photographer name. So this is the sample photo log. So in a professional forensic laboratories, photographer often link to the chain of custody. So the chain of custody is a documented history of evidence from the moment it collected until it is presented in the court. So if the photographs are not properly identified or sorted, questions may arise about their authenticity. So therefore proper documentation must protect both the evidence and the investigation. So there are some common mistake by the beginners like moving evidence from photography, taking blur photograph, ignoring surrounding, forgetting to include a scale when required, poor lighting, failing to maintain a photo log. Okay, so when you become a forensic investigation investigator, remember one thing: never rush. A crime scene is available only once. If you miss an important photograph today, you may never get another opportunity to take it again. Okay. So for the competitive exams, the examiner may ask what are the principle of the forensic photograph and include it in a MCQs. Okay. Okay. So you have to take the correct options from the given. So before you move to the next slide, I'm going to give you some questions whi- which you have to answer in the comment section. Okay, so the question one is what is meant by accuracy in forensic photography? Second is why is completeness important? Third is what does objectivity means? Fourth, why should photograph be taken in sequence? And the question number 5 is what information should the photo log contain? So if you can answer these questions, then you understood the important rules of forensic photography. Okay, so far we have learned why photography is performed and the principle of that guide every forensic photographer. So now it's time to study the practical side of the subject. So in the next slide, we will begin one of the most important topic for DSSSB JSA or forensic examinations, the type of crime scene photography. We will understand why investigator always photograph in the scene in a specific order. Overall view, mid-range view, close-up view. So the sequence is essential for accurate crime scene documentation. Okay, so move to the slides. Okay, now we are entering one of most practical and frequently asked topic in the forensic examination is type of crime scene photography. So every student should understand the important fact. The crime scene is never photographed randomly. The photographer follow a fixed sequence so that the no important information is lost. Think about reading a book. You don't start from the middle chapter. You begin from the first page and move forward. Crime scene photography work in exactly the same way. Every photograph tell a part of a story and together these photographs help investigators understand the what happened. So let me ask you a question. Suppose you enter a murder scene and immediately take a close-up photograph of a knife. So will anyone looking at that photograph know where the knife was found? Was it near the victim? Was it under the table? Was it outside the room? So the answer is no. A close-up photograph shows the evidence, but it does not show its surrounding. So this is why crime scene photography always follow a sequence. So these are the three tiers of the crime scene photography here. Okay. So tier one is overall. Okay. So wide range stabilizing shots for the entire scene. Okay. So tier two is mid range. Shows spatial relation between evidence and landmark. Tier three close up. Find details and individual traits. Okay. So I am writing some details here. So here is types. Here is purpose. So overall photography. So the important just shows the complete crime scene. Okay. Second is mid-range photograph. Shows the relationship between evidence and its surrounding. Third is close-up photography. Record the detail of individual evidences. Okay, so don't try to memorize these three types of now. Instead, understand the process. Each type answer a different question. So the overall photograph answer, where did the crime occur? Mid-range photograph answer, where was the evidence located within the crime scene? So the close-up photograph answer, what exactly the evidence look like. Okay. So once you understand these three questions, you will never forget this sequence. Okay. So purpose of overall photograph is show the entire scene. Mid-range photograph is shows the location of evidence within the scene. And close-up photograph is show the details of evidence very clearly. So imagine that I ask you to describe your classroom to a friend who has never visited it. How would you do it? First, you would pro- probably show a photograph of the entire classroom. Then you would show where the teacher's table is located. Finally, you would show a close-up photograph of the attendance register lying on the table without realizing it. Okay, so you have followed the exact same sequence used in forensic photography. Okay, so real crime scene example तो देखते हैं अब. Imagine a robbery inside a jewelry shop. So the investigator arrive at the scene. So if the first approach is only a close-up of a broken lock, nobody can understand where the lock is located. Okay, however, if the investigator first photograph the entire shop, then the entrance, and finally the broken lock, the story, the complete story become much clearer. This is why the order of photograph is just as important as photograph themselves. Okay, so the standard order of photography is photograph the entire crime scene, then photograph the evidence in its surrounding, then third is photograph the individual evidence in detail. Okay, so the important rule is never start directly with close-up photograph. So in professional crime scene investigation, photographer often take more photos than they think are necessary. Why? Because investigator cannot run later. They recreate the original scene. It is always better to have an additional photograph than to miss an important piece of evidence. Okay, so this is why forensic experts often says you can discard an unnecessary photograph later, but you cannot recreate a missed photograph. Okay, so for a DSSSB JSA exam, name the three. There is a question is name the three type of crimes in photography. Okay, so everyone, this is where we will conclude today's lecture. So let us quickly revise what we have covered in part one. So in the part one, we understand what forensic photography is and history. Then we know many pioneers of the forensic photography. Okay, then evolution of forensic photography, objective and scientific principles. Then we may move to the three major type of crime scene photography. So in the next lecture, we will begin a practical section of this chapter, which is overall photography in detail, followed by mid-range photography and close-up photography with real crime scene examples, camera positioning, common mistake, examination questions, and important MCQ. So make sure you don't miss the next lecture because this is where the practical application of forensic photography really begins. So if you found today's lecture helpful, please like the video, share it with your friend, and subscribe to Science Mentor and follow and for more high quality lectures of forensic science. So if you have any doubt or question, write them in the comment section. I will try my best to answer them. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next lecture. Until then, keep learning and keep exploring forensic science. Okay.